The iron beast wheezed to a stop, black smoke billowing into the Wyoming sky like a funeral pyre. Clara Whitmore pressed her gloved hands against the window, watching the desolate platform of Rock Creek Station materialize through the dust and steam. Her wedding dress, once pristine white, had taken on the color of old bone during the 3-day journey from Chicago. "End of the line, ma'am," the conductor announced, his weathered face creasing with concern as he noticed her attire. "You sure someone's meeting you here?" Clara forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My husband. He promised he'd be waiting." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. There would be no husband waiting, couldn't be, since the man she'd been forced to marry had died 2 weeks ago in a saloon brawl. News traveled slow in the territories, and she'd gambled everything on reaching James before word of Doyle Crane's death did. She gathered her meager belongings, a carpet bag with 2 dresses and her mother's Bible, and stepped onto the platform. The august heat slammed into her like a physical force, and she swayed, catching herself against a post. The wedding dress, heavy with dust and sweat, clung to her frame. "Mama." The small voice made her freeze. A boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, stood near the water tower. Sandy hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, Lord help her, those were James's eyes, clear and blue as a summer sky. "That's my mama," the boy announced to no one in particular, pointing at Clara with a certainty only children possessed. "She's wearing the dress, just like Pa said." Clara's heart stuttered. This couldn't be James's son. When she'd left 5 years ago, James had been unmarried, had sworn he'd wait for her. But the boy's features were unmistakable, the strong jaw already showing despite his youth, the way he cocked his head when studying something new. "Tommy!" A woman's voice cracked like a whip across the platform. "Thomas Michael Callahan, you get back here this instant." The boy Tommy ignored the command and walked closer, his bare feet raising small clouds of dust. "Are you really my mama? Pa said you'd come back someday. Said you'd be wearing a white dress like an angel." Clara knelt, her skirts pooling around her. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. "What's your pa's name?" "Sweetheart?" "James Callahan. He owns the Double C Ranch, about 5 miles north. He's the best horseman in the whole territory, and he can shoot a rabbit at 50 paces. And Tommy." This time the voice belonged to a man, and Clara would have recognized it anywhere. It rolled across the platform like thunder, freezing her blood and setting her heart racing all at once. She rose slowly, turning to face the ghost she'd crossed half the country to find. James Callahan looked exactly as she remembered, and nothing like him at all. The boy she'd loved had hardened into granite, all sharp angles and weather-beaten skin. His black hair was longer now, tied back with a leather cord, and a scar she didn't remember bisected his left eyebrow. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once looked at her with such tenderness, now held nothing but cold fury. "Get away from him!" His hand rested on the Colt at his hip, a gesture so natural it might have been unconscious. "Tommy, come here, now." The boy's face crumpled in confusion. "But Pa, you said—" "I said come here." James never took his eyes off Clara. "Mrs. Henderson, please take Tommy to the wagon." The woman who'd called out earlier, a plump matron with kind eyes, hurried forward and took Tommy's hand. The boy protested, but she hushed him with promises of peppermint sticks, leading him away despite his backward glances. Once they were gone, James stepped closer. Clara could smell leather and tobacco, horse and hay scents that transported her back to stolen moments in her father's barn, to promises whispered against her neck, to a love that had seemed strong enough to conquer anything. "Clara," her name on his lips was an accusation. "Or should I say Mrs. Crane?" She flinched, so he knew about the marriage. "James, please, let me explain." "Explain!" His laugh was sharp as broken glass. Explain how you promised to wait for me, how you swore you'd find a way to break free from your father, how you married another man 3 months after I left for the cavalry." "I didn't have a choice." The words erupted from her. 5 years of anguish compressed into a single cry. "My father." "Your father offered me money to stay away? Did you know that—" James circled her slowly. "A predator sizing up prey. Said his daughter was too good for a half-Irish ranch hand. Said you'd already chosen someone more suitable." "That's not true." "No, then where were you when I came back? When I stood in your parlor like a fool, ring in my pocket, only to have your father tell me you'd married Doyle Crane and moved to Chicago." Clara's legs trembled, but she forced herself to remain standing. "I wrote to you dozens of letters. I tried to explain. I never got any letters." "Because my father paid to have them destroyed, just like he paid the minister to perform a ceremony I never consented to. Just like he paid men to hold me down while they forced laudanum down my throat so I couldn't protest when they—" She broke off, unable to continue. James had gone very still. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, doubt, perhaps, or the ghost of the man who'd once loved her. Then his face hardened again. "A convenient story, now that Crane is dead." She stared at him. "You know about that." "The news travels, even to the territories." He turned away, signaling the conversation was over. "There's a boarding house in town. Mrs. Murphy takes in strays. You should find a room there until the next train east." "James, please." She caught his sleeve, feeling the muscles tense beneath the fabric. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I'm telling the truth. I never stopped loving you, not for one day." He jerked free of her grip. "Love?" The word dripped contempt. "You want to know about love? Clara Love is raising a boy whose mother died birthing him because she was too frail for frontier life. Love is working 16-hour days to build something worthy of the family you'll never have. Love is learning to live with a hole in your chest where your heart used to be." "His mother," Clara's mind reeled. "But Tommy called me—" "A fairy tale I was fool enough to tell him, about a woman who'd come back someday." His smile was cruel. "Imagine my surprise when you actually showed up." Clara felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough tears for James Callahan. "If you won't listen to me, at least let me—" "Let you what destroy what peace I've managed to build? Confuse my son with your lies?" He shook his head. "Get on the next train. Clara, there's nothing for you here." He strode away, spurs ringing against the wooden platform. Clara watched him go, her heart breaking all over again. But she wouldn't leave. Not this time. She'd lost 5 years to her father's machinations and Doyle Crane's cruelty. She wouldn't lose any more. "Sir, Mr. Callahan," she called out, and he paused without turning. "I buried my husband 2 weeks ago. I could have gone anywhere, started fresh where no one knew my name or my shame. But I came here. Ask yourself why." He stood frozen for a long moment, shoulders rigid with tension. Then, without a word, he continued walking. Clara remained on the platform as the sun climbed higher, wilting in her wedding dress like a flower torn from its roots. Around her, the town of Rock Creek began its daily rhythm, shopkeepers sweeping storefronts, cowboys driving cattle to the stockyards, women in calico dresses eyeing her with suspicious curiosity. She'd known it would be difficult, had known James would be angry, hurt, possibly remarried. But the reality of his hatred, the stone wall he'd built around his heart, was more painful than anything Doyle Crane had ever done to her. At least with Doyle. She'd known where she stood. With James. She could see the man she'd loved buried beneath layers of bitterness and betrayal, close enough to touch but impossibly out of reach. A shadow fell across her, and she looked up to find Mrs. Henderson, the woman who'd taken Tommy. The older woman's face had softened from suspicion to something like pity. "You'll be needing a place to stay," she said, not quite meeting Clara's eyes. "Mrs. Murphy's boarding house is 2 blocks down. Yellow building with green shutters. She's fair. Doesn't ask too many questions. Thank you, Clara managed. Mrs. Henderson hesitated, then leaned closer. That boy's been waiting for a mother his whole life. James filled his head with stories about a woman in a white dress who'd come back to love them both. Don't know who you are or what happened between you and James, but if you're planning on staying, you'd best be sure of your reasons. That man's been hurt enough, and the boy doesn't deserve to pay for adult foolishness. Before Clara could respond, the woman bustled away, leaving her alone again. In the distance, she could see dust rising from the road north. James and Tommy heading home to the Double C Ranch. Her throat tightened with unshed tears as she remembered another road. Another time, when she'd watched James ride away to join the cavalry, both of them certain he'd return to claim her. She'd been 17 then, full of hope and secret plans. Now she was 22, a widow with scars both visible and hidden, returning to a man who'd rather see her dead than believe her truth. But she was also stronger than the girl who'd been too weak to fight her father's will. This time, she wouldn't run. This time, she'd make James listen, even if it meant camping on his doorstep until winter drove her away. Clara picked up her carpet bag and walked toward the yellow building with green shutters. Behind her, the train whistled its departure, carrying away her last chance for an easy escape. She didn't look back. She'd spent 5 years looking back. Now, for better or worse, there was only forward. The storm rolled in from the mountains like an army of vengeful spirits, turning the afternoon sky black as coal. Clara pressed her face against the boarding house window, watching the first fat drop splatter against the glass. 3 days she'd waited. 3 days of whispered conversations dying when she entered the general store, of curtains twitching as she passed. 3 days of gathering courage that melted like spring snow every time she thought of facing James again. You'll catch your death standing in that draft. Mrs. Murphy observed from her rocking chair, knitting needles clicking in steady rhythm. The boarding house proprietress was a widow herself, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, but kind in her way. Though I suspect you're planning something foolish regardless. Clara turned from the window. What makes you say that? Child, I've run this establishment for 15 years. I know the look of a woman about to do something that'll either save her soul or damn it. The needles never paused. You're fixing to go to the Double C, aren't you? There was no point in denying it. Tommy's been ill. I heard at the Mercantile. Mrs. Murphy's expression didn't change, but her knitting slowed. Summer fever. The Henderson boy had it last week. Most children pull through fine, but it's hard on them. Harder on the parents. James is alone out there. James Callahan has been alone for 7 years. Ever since he came back from the cavalry to find his world torn apart. He's managed. But nothing. The older woman set down her knitting and fixed Clara with a stern look. I don't know what happened between you two, and it's none of my business. What I do know is that James is a good man who's built a wall around himself so high and thick that nobody's been able to breach it. You show up in a wedding dress talking about the past, and suddenly he's leaving Tommy with neighbors and riding out at all hours like the devil's chasing him. Clara's heart clenched. He left Tommy. With the Hendersons, yes, said he had business to attend to, but anyone with eyes could see he's running from you. Mrs. Murphy resumed her knitting. Question is, are you the disease or the cure? Thunder crashed overhead, and the rain began in earnest, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. Clara made her decision. She couldn't sit here while Tommy was ill and James was suffering. Even if he hated her, even if he sent her away again, she had to try. I'll need to borrow a horse, she said. Mrs. Murphy sighed. There's an old mare in the stable. She's not much to look at, but she knows the way to the Double C. Helped James bring supplies out there more than once. She paused. There's oilcloth in the tack room. You'll need it in this weather. Clara was already moving toward the door. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. And Clara, she turned back to find Mrs. Murphy watching her with something like sympathy. Whatever secrets you're carrying, whatever pain you're hiding, the truth has a way of coming out in storms. Make sure you're ready for that. The ride to the Double C was a nightmare of mud and lashing rain. Clara hunched low over the mare's neck, grateful for the steady beast who seemed to know every rut and rock in the road. The oilcloth kept the worst of the rain off, but water found its way through every gap, soaking her to the skin more than once. Lightning split the sky so close she could smell the burnt air, and the mare shied, nearly throwing her. By the time the ranch came into view, Clara was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. The main house sat on a small rise, a 2-story structure of logs and rough-hewn boards that looked solid enough to withstand anything Wyoming could throw at it. Light glowed in several windows, warm and inviting against the storm's fury. She dismounted at the gate, her legs nearly buckling from cold and exhaustion. The front door opened before she could knock, and James filled the doorway, rifle in hand. When he recognized her, his expression shifted from wariness to something darker. "Are you insane?" He grabbed her arm, pulling her inside. "You could have died out there." "Tommy?" she managed through chattering teeth. "I heard he was sick." "So you rode 5 miles in a thunderstorm." He was already moving, grabbing a blanket from a chest near the door. "Strip." "What?" "Your clothes are soaked through. Strip, or you'll catch your death." When she hesitated, he turned his back. "I've seen you in less—" "Clara, don't get modest on me now." Her frozen fingers fumbled with buttons and laces. The wet fabric clung stubbornly, and she bit back a sob of frustration. Without turning, James said, "There are dry clothes in the chest. They belonged to Tommy's mother." Clara found a simple cotton dress and undergarments, changing quickly while James kept his back turned. The clothes were too short, whoever Tommy's mother had been. She'd been petite, but they were dry and warm. "You can turn around," she said quietly. He did, and for a moment, his carefully maintained mask slipped. She saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, worry in the set of his mouth. Then the wall came back up. This was foolish. He said, "Where's Tommy?" "Upstairs, asleep. The fever broke this morning." Relief flooded through her. "Thank God!" God had nothing to do with it, just willow bark tea and cold compresses. He moved to the fireplace, adding another log to the flames. "You should go back as soon as the storm passes." "James!" "Don't!" He gripped the mantel, knuckles white. "Just don't!" A small voice drifted down from upstairs. "Pa." James was moving before the word finished, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Clara followed without thinking, drawn by the need to help. She found them in a small bedroom under the eaves. Tommy propped against pillows while James felt his forehead. "Hey there, partner," James said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Thirsty." Tommy's voice was hoarse but stronger than Clara had feared. His eyes found her in the doorway and widened. "The angel lady." James's shoulders tensed. "Tommy." "You came back." The boy tried to sit up straighter, reaching toward Clara. "Pa said you would. He said you'd come when we needed you most." Clara looked at James. Who wouldn't meet her eyes? She moved to the bed, sitting carefully on the edge. "Hello, Tommy. Your pa's been taking good care of you." "He always does." Tommy's small hand found hers, hot but not fevered. "But he's sad sometimes. At night, when he thinks I'm sleeping. He sits by the fire and looks at a picture he keeps in his pocket." "Tommy," James warned. "It's of you, isn't it?" The boy's eyes, so like his father's, were bright with certainty. "The lady in the white dress. That's why I knew you at the station." Clara's throat tightened. She glanced at James, who looked like he'd been shot. "Tommy needs water," he said roughly, fleeing the room. "Did I say something wrong?" Tommy asked. No, sweetheart. Your PA just worries about you. She smoothed his hair back, the gesture achingly maternal. You should rest now. Will you stay when I was really sick? I dreamed you were here, singing to me. His eyes were already drooping. You have a pretty voice. Clara's vision blurred. What did I sing? The song about the mockingbird. Mama used to sing it too, before she went to heaven. She didn't trust herself to speak. Instead, she began to hum, then sing softly, Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. By the time she finished, Tommy was asleep. She sat watching him, this child who might have been hers in another life. When she finally left the room, she found James at the bottom of the stairs, a glass of water forgotten in his hand. His mother, Clara said quietly. Tell me about her. James set the glass on a table with excessive care. Nothing to tell. She died. James. Her name was Mary. We met in Kansas when I was mustering out. She was... He paused, searching for words. She was kind, gentle. Everything I thought I'd never have after you. The words cut deep, but Clara forced herself to listen. We married quickly. Too quickly. She wasn't made for this life, the isolation, the hard work. She tried, but I could see it wearing on her. When she got pregnant, she was so happy. Said a baby would make it easier, give her purpose. His voice roughened. She hemorrhaged. The doctor was 15 miles away. By the time he arrived... I'm sorry, Clara whispered. Are you... He turned on her suddenly. Because from where I stand, if you'd kept your promises, Mary would still be alive. She'd be in Kansas, married to someone who could have given her the life she deserved, instead of dying in this God-forsaken place, trying to be something she wasn't. Clara felt each word like a physical blow. That's not fair. Fair, he laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair would have been you waiting for me like you promised. Fair would have been your father not being able to buy you like cattle. Fair would have been... He broke off, running a hand through his hair. It doesn't matter. None of it matters anymore. It matters to me. Clara said fiercely. Do you think I wanted any of this? Do you think I chose to marry Doyle Crane? I fought... James! I fought until they... She wrapped her arms around herself, unable to continue. Until they what? The storm outside seemed to pause, waiting. Clara forced herself to meet his eyes. Until they held me down and forced laudanum down my throat. Until I was too drugged to protest when they dressed me like a doll and propped me up at the altar. Until I woke up 3 days later in a Chicago hotel room with a ring on my finger and bruises on my arms. James went very still. Clara, you want to know about my marriage? About the man my father chose? Doyle liked his women compliant. When the drugs wore off and I tried to leave, he showed me exactly how compliant he expected me to be. She laughed, the sound sharp and broken. 5 years. James. 5 years of being his property, his punching bag, his... She couldn't say the words. And through it all, the only thing that kept me sane was the thought that someday, somehow, I'd find my way back to you. Stop! His voice was hoarse. No, you wanted the truth. Here it is. When Doyle died in that saloon, I could have stayed in Chicago. I had money, not much, but enough. I could have built a new life where no one knew my shame. Instead, I used every penny to come here, knowing you might hate me, knowing you might send me away, because even your hatred is better than a life without you in it. The room fell silent except for the rain drumming against the windows. James stood frozen, his face a battlefield of emotions. Finally, he moved to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. I can't, he said eventually. I can't just forget 5 years of... I'm not asking you to. Clara accepted the glass he offered, the whiskey burning away the chill. I'm just asking you to listen, to consider that maybe Just maybe. We were both victims of my father's greed and pride. James drained his glass in one swallow. Tommy needs a mother. Tommy needs his father whole and happy, not bitter and broken because of me. I'm not broken. Clara set down her glass and moved closer. He tensed, but didn't retreat. Aren't you? Because the James I knew would never teach his son to wait for ghosts. He'd teach him to live, to love, to trust. The James you knew was a fool. No. She reached out, hesitating just before touching his face. He was the best man I've ever known. And I think he's still in there, buried under all that pain. Thunder crashed overhead, and the lamp flickered. In that moment of shifting light, she saw it a flash of the boy who'd kissed her in her father's hayloft, who'd promised her forever with stars as their witness. Then it was gone, and he stepped back. The storm's getting worse. You'll have to stay tonight. It was surrender of a sort, though not the kind she'd hoped for. Thank you. Don't thank me. This changes nothing. But his voice lacked conviction, and when he turned away, she caught sight of his hand moving unconsciously to his vest pocket where Tommy said he kept her picture. Maybe Murphy was right. Maybe the storm would wash away more than dust and heat. Maybe, in the wild electricity of a Wyoming thunderstorm, truth had a way of striking where it was least expected. As if in agreement, lightning split the sky, illuminating the ranch in stark relief. And in that brief, brilliant moment, Clara thought she saw a future unclear, uncertain, but possible. She just had to survive the storm first. The morning after the storm dawned crystal clear, as if the violence of the night had scoured the sky clean. Clara woke in the small room James had given her Mary's room. She realized, seeing the delicate touches that spoke of another woman's presence, an embroidered sampler on the wall, a silver brush on the dresser, dried wildflowers in a blue glass vase. From outside came the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly in Mary's borrowed clothes and ventured downstairs to find Tommy at the kitchen table, spooning porridge with the focused determination of the recently recovered. Morning, he chirped, then frowned. Pa said I'm not supposed to talk to you. Clara's heart sank. Did he say why? No. But he was using his serious voice, the one he uses when I try to pet rattlesnakes. Tommy considered this. Are you dangerous like a rattlesnake? I hope not. She moved to the stove where coffee still steamed. Where is your PA? Fixing the fence. Storm knocked down a whole section. He said I couldn't help because I'm still weak. But I'm not weak. Watch. He flexed his thin arm, showing non-existent muscles. Despite everything, Clara smiled. Very impressive, but maybe you should listen to your PA just this once. Tommy's face fell. That's what Mrs. Henderson says too. She's coming to get me after breakfast. Get you? Pa says I need to stay with them for a few days. He has work to do. The boy pushed his porridge around. I don't want to go. Samuel Henderson puts frogs in my bed. Clara felt anger rise in her throat. James was sending Tommy away because of her, punishing the boy for her presence. She moved to the window and saw him by the eastern fence line, shirt plastered to his back with sweat as he wrestled with a fallen post. Finish your breakfast, she told Tommy. I need to speak with your father. The walk to the fence seemed longer than it was. James saw her coming and kept working, driving the post deep with powerful swings of a sledgehammer. She waited until he paused to wipe his brow. You're sending Tommy away. He didn't look at her. It's for the best. For who, him or you? Don't, he grabbed another rail. You don't get to question my decisions about my son. He just recovered from a fever. He needs to be home, in his own bed, with his father. What he needs is stability. Not some woman who'll disappear again when things get difficult. The accusation stung, but Clara held her ground. I'm not going anywhere. Aren't you? He finally faced her, eyes hard as flint. Because from where I stand, you're just passing through, again. Only because you won't let me stay. Let you, he laughed harshly. This isn't about letting you do anything. Clara, this is about protecting my son from getting attached to someone who's already proved she can't be trusted. I told you what happened. You told me a story, a convenient tale of drugs and force that absolves you of all responsibility. He turned back to his work. Even if it's true, and that's a big if, it doesn't change anything. You still left. You still married him. You still chose your father's money over our life together. Clara felt something snap inside her. Chose you think I chose any of this? She grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. Look at me, James. Really look at me. He tried to pull away, but she held on with desperate strength. With her free hand, she pushed up her sleeve, revealing the scars that wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet. Rope burns, she said quietly. From the first time I tried to escape, Doyle was creative in his punishments. She released James and lifted her hair, showing him the thin white line behind her ear. This is from a brandy snifter he threw when I mentioned your name. And here, she touched her ribs, where the borrowed dress couldn't quite hide the raised welts. 3 broken ribs that didn't heal right because he wouldn't let me see a doctor. Said I needed to learn my lesson. James had gone pale beneath his tan. Clara. You want to know what I chose? Her voice broke. I chose to survive. Every day. Every hour. I chose to live through whatever hell he put me through because I had to believe that someday I'd find my way back to you. That's what I chose. James. You. She turned to leave, but his hand caught her wrist gently. So gently, his thumb brushing over the scars there. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was hoarse. At the station. Why didn't you? Would you have believed me? You could barely stand to look at me. She pulled free. Besides, my shame isn't something I share easily, even now. Telling you makes me feel dirty. You're not dirty. The words seemed pulled from him against his will. Whatever he did, it wasn't your fault. Wasn't it maybe if I'd been stronger, fought harder? Stop! He caught her shoulders, giving her a gentle shake. Don't do that. I've seen what men like that can do. In the cavalry, we sometimes found women who'd been hurt by raiders, by their own men. It was never their fault. Clara searched his face, looking for the disgust she'd learned to expect. Instead, she found something that might have been understanding, possibly even the beginning of belief. I still can't, he said finally. Even if everything you've said is true, I can't just forget the past 5 years. I can't pretend. A wagon rattled into view. Mrs. Henderson at the reins. James stepped back quickly. The moment shattered. That's Tommy's ride, he said unnecessarily. Don't send him away. Clara caught his hand. Please, James, whatever you think of me, don't punish him. He looked down at their joined hands, and for a moment, his fingers tightened around hers. Then he pulled away. It's already arranged. They walked back to the house in silence. Tommy was waiting on the porch, a small bundle beside him. When he saw them, his face lit up. Pa, can't she come with us to the Hendersons, Mrs.? Henderson wouldn't mind, and I could show her my fishing spot, and— No. James's voice was firm, but not unkind. Mrs., Clara needs to go back to town. Tommy's face crumpled. But why she sang to me when I was sick. She's nice, and you said— Thomas. The serious voice Tommy had mentioned. We've discussed this. The boy's shoulders slumped in defeat. He picked up his bundle and trudged to the wagon, every line of his small body radiating misery. Mrs. Henderson gave James a look that could have curdled milk. Sending away a sick child, she muttered, loud enough to carry. And for what? Because you're too stubborn to— Thank you for taking him, Mrs. Henderson. James's tone brooked no argument. The older woman sniffed but helped Tommy into the wagon. As they pulled away, the boy turned back, waving frantically at Clara. She waved back, her heart breaking at the confusion in his eyes. "That was cruel," she said once the wagon disappeared. "Cruel would be letting him get attached to you. James headed for the house. I'll saddle your horse." "No." He stopped. "Excuse me?" I said no. I'm not leaving. "This is my land, my home, and I'm not leaving." She planted herself on the porch steps. "You want me gone? You'll have to carry me. And we both know you won't lay hands on a woman. Not even me." His jaw worked. "Clara, be reasonable." "Reasonable." She laughed, high and slightly wild. "I've been reasonable for 5 years. Reasonable got me a marriage I didn't want and scars I'll carry forever. I'm done being reasonable." "What do you want from me?" The question exploded from him. "You want forgiveness, fine. I forgive you. You want me to say, I believe you, all right. I believe you. Now will you go?" "I want you to stop running." She stood, moving closer. "I want you to stop hiding behind your anger and actually feel something. I want you to admit that you sent Tommy away because seeing us together scares you." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Then why are you backing away from me?" She took another step forward, and sure enough, he retreated. "Why haven't you looked me in the eye since I showed you my scars? Why does your hand shake when you reach for your coffee cup?" "Stop it." "Why do you still carry my picture?" That froze him. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small daguerreotype. Clara gasped softly. It was her at 17, taken just days before he'd left for the cavalry. She remembered sitting for it, how she'd insisted on wearing her best dress, how she'd smiled thinking of him carrying her image into battle. "You want to know why I kept it?" His voice was dangerous now. "To remind myself, to remember what believing in love cost me. Every time I was tempted to trust again, to let someone in, I'd look at this sweet lying face and remember." He flung the picture at her feet. The glass cracked against the porch boards, fracturing her younger self into a spider web of lines. Clara knelt, picking up the damaged photograph with careful hands. "I'm not that girl anymore," she said quietly. "And you're not that boy. We can't go back, James, but maybe we could go forward." "To what?" His voice was raw. "What possible future could we have? Too much has happened. Too much pain." "Then let's start with today." She stood, still cradling the broken picture. "Just today. Let me stay. Help with the ranch work. Tommy needs someone here when he comes home. You need help with the fence, the horses, the house. No promises, no expectations. Just today." He stared at her for a long moment. "And tomorrow? We'll face tomorrow when it comes." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Though the sky remained clear, James glanced toward the mountains, then back at her. "There's more storms coming. Weather like this, they line up one after another." "I'm not afraid of storms." "No," he said quietly. "I'm beginning to see that." He was silent for another moment. Then, "The hen house needs mucking. Eggs need gathering. There's bread dough that needs kneading for dinner." Clara felt hope flutter in her chest. "I can do that." "It's hard work. Harder than anything you've ever—" "James!" She met his eyes steadily. "I survived 5 years of hell. I think I can handle a few chickens." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite acceptance, but perhaps the possibility of it. "Just today," he said finally. "Just today," she agreed. He turned and walked toward the barn, shoulders rigid with tension. Clara watched him go, then looked down at the cracked photograph in her hands. Her younger self smiled up at her through the fractured glass, frozen in a moment of perfect hope. She couldn't be that girl again. Too much had happened, too much pain carved into both their hearts. But perhaps broken things could be mended, even if the cracks always showed. Perhaps love wasn't about perfection, but about choosing to stay, to work, to hope, even when the storms came. Thunder rumbled again, closer now. Clara tucked the photograph carefully into her pocket and went to face the chickens. It was a start, and for today, just today, that was enough. Inside the barn, unseen, James leaned against a stall door and tried to quiet the hammering of his heart. Through a gap in the walls, he could see her entering the henhouse, could hear her surprised yelp as the rooster charged. Despite everything, his lips twitched toward a smile. Just today, he told himself, he could survive one day. He'd survived 5 years. What was one more day? But even as he tried to convince himself, he knew the truth. One day would become 2, then 3, then a week, because no matter how much he'd tried to hate her, no matter how thick he'd built his walls, Clara Whitmore had always been his weakness. And God help him, he was tired of being strong. The storm struck just after midnight, worse than the one that had brought Clara to the ranch. Lightning turned night into day. Thunder shook the walls, and rain hammered the roof like bullets. Clara woke to the sound of Tommy's terrified screaming from the room next door. She was moving before fully awake, bare feet slapping against cold floorboards. She found James already there, trying to calm his son. But Tommy was beyond reason, caught in the grip of fever dreams and terror. "The angels are angry," the boy sobbed, clinging to his father. "They're breaking the sky." "It's just a storm, partner," James soothed. But his own face was drawn with worry. The fever had returned, worse than before, and Tommy's skin burned like a furnace. "We need to bring the fever down," Clara said, pushing past any awkwardness. This was no time for their complicated dance of hurt and hesitation. "Cold water, lots of it, and willow bark tea if you have any left." James nodded, grateful for direction. "There's a well pump in the kitchen. I'll get the tea started." For the next hours, they worked in seamless coordination, old rhythms reasserting themselves as if 5 years hadn't passed. Clara bathed Tommy's face and wrists with cold cloths, while James coaxed spoonfuls of tea between the boy's chattering teeth. When Tommy thrashed, they held him gently. When he cried for his mother, Clara sang the mockingbird song until her throat was raw. "Why won't it break?" James's control finally cracked around 3 in the morning. Tommy had fallen into a restless doze, but his temperature remained dangerously high. "It broke before. Why won't it break now?" "Sometimes the second fever is worse," Clara said quietly. "My mother used to say it was the sickness fighting back one last time." She didn't add what else her mother had said, that sometimes the sickness won. James buried his face in his hands. "I can't lose him. Clara, he's all I have. If something happens to him—" "Nothing's going to happen to him." She gripped his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. "We won't let it. Do you hear me? We'll fight this together." Something shifted in his storm-gray eyes. "Together. Together." Thunder crashed overhead, so close the windows rattled. Tommy whimpered in his sleep, and they both turned back to him. Clara noticed the child clutching something, the small handkerchief she'd seen before. "What is that?" she asked softly. James's jaw tightened. It was yours. From before. He found it in my things years ago. Decided it was his mother's. I never had the heart to correct him." He laughed bitterly. "Pathetic. Isn't it letting my son cling to remnants of a woman who's here now?" Clara interrupted. "Who's not going anywhere?" Before he could respond, Tommy's eyes fluttered open. "Papa," his voice was weak but clearer than it had been. "I'm cold." James felt his forehead, and his whole body sagged with relief. "The fever's breaking! Thank God, it's breaking!" They bundled Tommy in every blanket they could find, Clara holding him while James built up the fire. The storm still raged outside, but inside the small room, a different kind of peace settled. Tommy, exhausted but cool-skinned at last, curled between them like he belonged there. "Tell me about Mama," he whispered. James stiffened, but Clara touched his hand gently. "What would you like to know?" Did she have yellow hair like me? Clara glanced at James, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She did, Clara said, like sunshine. And did she sing? Beautifully. She knew all the best songs. Tommy smiled sleepily. I knew it. Pa said she'd come when we needed her most. And you did. The words hung in the air like a blessing and a curse. Clara felt James withdraw emotionally, even as he remained physically present. The moment of partnership, of together, was already fracturing. Sleep now, she murmured to Tommy. We'll be right here. The boy drifted off, his breathing evening out. They sat in silence, listening to the storm and their own tumultuous thoughts. Finally, James spoke. I need you to understand something, he said, voice low. What happened tonight? It doesn't change anything. I'm grateful for your help with Tommy, but you still want me gone. Clara finished for him. I don't know what I want. The admission seemed torn from him. When I saw you with him, when we were working together like before. Yes, he scrubbed a hand over his face. For a moment, I forgot the pain, forgot the betrayal, forgot everything except how right it felt. And that terrifies me. Why? Because I can't survive losing you again. The words came out raw, bleeding. I barely survived it the first time. If I let you in, if I let myself hope. Clara wanted to reach for him, but didn't dare. I'm not asking you to forget, James. I'm not asking you to trust me completely. I'm just asking for a chance. To do what? To show you who I am now. Not the girl who was too weak to fight her father. Not the woman who survived Doyle. Just me, Clara. Scarred and damaged, but still here. Still loving you. He flinched at the last words. Don't what? Don't love you too late for that. I never stopped. Clara! You kept my picture, she pressed on. Broken and bitter as you were, you kept it. Why, I told you to remind myself. Liar. She said it gently, without heat. You kept it because you couldn't let go any more than I could. We're connected, James. We always have been. Fighting it is just hurting us both. Lightning illuminated the room, showing his face in stark relief, all angles and shadows, and barely contained emotion. Even if that's true, too much has happened. We can't just pick up where we left off. I don't want to pick up where we left off. Clara shifted carefully, trying not to wake Tommy. Those were children who made those promises. We're different people now, harder, maybe, definitely more damaged, but also stronger. Are we? James looked down at his son, then back at her. Because right now I feel anything but strong. The storm was beginning to pass, thunder growing distant. Tommy made a small sound in his sleep, and James automatically adjusted his blankets. The gesture was so tender, so unconsciously protective, that Clara's heart ached. Can I ask you something? She said. About Mary, Tommy's mother. James tensed but nodded. Did you love her? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I tried. She deserved that much. She was sweet, kind, everything a man should want. But she wasn't you. The admission seemed to surprise him. I'd look at her across the dinner table and hate myself for wishing she had green eyes instead of brown. I'd hold her and feel like a fraud because my arms remembered a different shape. She knew, I think, near the end. She said... He stopped. What did she say? She said she hoped I'd find the woman in the picture someday, that Tommy deserved a mother who could make his father smile again. His voice roughened. I told her she was delirious from the fever, but her eyes were clear. She knew. Clara blinked back tears. She sounds wonderful. She was too good for the life I gave her. Too good for a man hung up on ghosts. Not ghosts, Clara said softly. Just misplaced souls trying to find their way home. They sat in silence as dawn crept across the sky. The storm finally spent. Tommy slept on. His fever truly broken now, his small hand clutching Clara's handkerchief. James looked exhausted. 5 years of walls and anger crumbling under the weight of the night's emotions. "I can't promise anything," he said finally. "I can't promise to forget or forgive or love you like I did before." "I'm not asking for promises." "Then what are you asking for?" Clara considered carefully. "Time. Just time. Let me stay through the harvest. Let me help with Tommy, with the ranch. Not as your wife or your beloved or even your friend, just as someone who cares about you both and wants to help. And after harvest, we'll see where we are. If you still want me gone, I'll go. No arguments, no scenes. I'll leave and never bother you again." James studied her face in the growing light. "You mean that—" "I survived 5 years of hell by learning to be patient. James, I can survive a few more months." "It won't be easy. The town already talks. If you stay—" "Let them talk." Clara's chin lifted. "I've been gossiped about in finer circles than Rock Creek. Wyoming, besides." She glanced down at Tommy. "Isn't he worth a little scandal?" James followed her gaze, his expression softening. "Everything worthwhile seems to come with scandal attached." He stood carefully, stretching stiff muscles. "I need to check the stock. Storm like that probably spooked them good. I'll stay with Tommy." He paused at the door. "Clara, thank you for tonight, for—" He gestured helplessly. "Just thank you. We're in this together. Remember, even if it's just for now." He nodded and left. Clara heard his footsteps on the stairs, the creak of the front door, the splash of his boots through puddles. Normal sounds of a normal morning, except nothing about this was normal. Tommy stirred, mumbling something about angels and mockingbirds. Clara smoothed his hair, humming softly. Outside, the sun broke through the last of the clouds, painting the rain-washed world in shades of gold and green. A new day, a new chance. She thought of the cracked daguerreotype in her pocket, of the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. That girl had loved with the fierce certainty of youth. This woman loved with the patient endurance of someone who'd learned that true love wasn't a feeling but a choice, made daily, hourly, moment by moment. James might never love her that way again. The boy who'd kissed her breathless in her father's barn was as gone as the girl in the picture. But maybe, just maybe, the man and woman they'd become could build something new. Not a restoration of what was, but a creation of what could be. Tommy's hand tightened on her handkerchief, and Clara made her choice. She'd stay. Through harvest, through winter if he'd let her. She'd work until her hands bled and her back ached. She'd face down gossip and ghosts and storms both literal and figurative. Because some things were worth fighting for. And James Callahan's stubborn, wounded, impossible James was worth everything. The sun climbed higher, chasing away the last shadows of the storm. And in the small room under the eaves, Clara kept watch over the two people who'd become her entire world, her second chance at the life she'd always dreamed of. Time. That's all she needed. Time and the kind of stubborn patience that only came from surviving the worst life could offer. She could do this. For them. For herself. For the love that refused to die despite everything that had tried to kill it. After all, she'd survived Doyle Crane. How hard could a few months on a Wyoming ranch be? The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the main room of the ranch house. Outside, September wind rattled the windows, carrying the first hint of autumn's chill. Clara sat mending one of Tommy's shirts, her needle moving in steady rhythm. Across from her, James worked on the ranch ledgers, his brow furrowed in concentration. It had been 3 weeks since the night of Tommy's fever, 3 weeks of careful distance and cautious cooperation. They moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the steps, occasionally brushing close before retreating to safer ground. The house had settled into a routine that was both comforting and maddening in its restraint. "Receipts from the cattle sale," James said suddenly, sliding a paper across the table. "Need to go to town tomorrow to deposit them at the bank." "I could go," Clara offered without looking up. "I need supplies anyway. Mrs. Murphy asked me to pick up some things for her." "You've been staying at Murphy's?" "On weekends, when Tommy's with the Hendersons." She kept her voice neutral. It was part of their unspoken agreement she helped during the week, but maintained the fiction of residing in town. For propriety, James had said. For his sanity, Clara suspected. That's not necessary. There's room here." Clara's needle stilled. People would talk. "They already talk." He set down his pen with unnecessary force. "Might as well give them something real to gossip about." "James, I'm tired of it." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Tired of pretending you don't live here. Tired of watching you pack a bag every Friday like a visitor. Tommy asks why you leave. What am I supposed to tell him?" "The truth. That we're being careful. That things are complicated." "Complicated?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's one word for it." Clara set aside her mending. These past weeks had been a study in torture close enough to touch, but separated by invisible walls. She'd watched him work the horses, remembering how those hands had once touched her with reverence. She'd listened to his laughter with Tommy, aching to join in fully instead of hovering at the edges like a ghost. "What do you want me to say?" she asked quietly. "That I hate leaving, that every Friday feels like tearing off a piece of myself, that I lie awake at Murphy's wondering if you're doing the same." He turned from the window, his eyes dark with something that might have been hunger. "Do you lie awake?" "Every night." The admission escaped before she could stop it. "Even here, especially here, knowing you're just down the hall. Close enough to—" She broke off, heat rising in her cheeks. The air between them crackled like the fire. James took a step closer, then another, until he stood near enough that she could smell the leather and soap scent of him. "This was a mistake," he said roughly. "Letting you stay. Every day it gets harder to remember why I was angry. Every day you're here, being patient and kind and so damnably present. I forget why I need to keep you at arm's length." "Then stop." Clara stood, bringing them even closer. "Stop remembering. Stop fighting. Just stop." "You don't understand." His hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell. "The anger is all that's protecting me. Without it, I'm just that fool boy again, ready to promise you everything." "I don't want everything. I just want—" What do you want, Clara?" The question hung between them, loaded with 5 years of pain and 3 weeks of careful reconstruction. Clara felt the weight of it, the importance of her answer. "This," she said finally. "Just this, sitting by the fire while you work, watching you teach Tommy to rope, arguing about who makes better coffee. Small things, real things. The life we should have had." James closed his eyes. "Clara!" "I know we can't go back. I know too much has happened. But James, we're here now. We survived everything that tried to break us. Doesn't that count for something?" When he opened his eyes, they were wet. "I dream about you. Is that what you want to hear every night? I dream about you. Sometimes it's before you in that yellow dress you wore to the church social, smiling at me like I hung the moon. Sometimes it's things that never happened, you standing at this stove, heavy with our child, humming while you cook. And sometimes—" His voice dropped. "Sometimes I dream of you with him, of what he might have done, and I wake up wanting to kill a man who's already dead." Clara's breath caught. "James, the worst part is, I don't know which dreams hurt more, the good ones, for what we lost, or the bad ones, for what you endured while I was here, hating you for crimes you didn't commit. You didn't know. I should have. His hand finally found her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. The Clara I knew would never have betrayed me. I should have fought for you, should have demanded answers. Instead, I let pride and hurt blind me. We both made mistakes. No. He silenced her with a finger to her lips. You were a victim. I was a coward. There's a difference. Clara caught his hand, pressing it against her cheek. You're here now. We're both here now. That's what matters. Is it? His other hand framed her face, tilting it up. Because being here, like this, feels like standing on the edge of a cliff. One wrong step and we both fall. Then we fall together. Clara. Her name was a prayer, a plea, a surrender. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like the sweet stolen moments of their youth. This was desperate, hungry. 5 years of longing compressed into the meeting of lips and tongues and souls. Clara's hands fisted in his shirt, anchoring herself as the world spun away. He backed her against the table, kissing her like a drowning man seeking air. Stay inside me fully, she panted against his mouth, the words torn from some deep, primal place. Only you, he groaned, pressing closer, his body a solid wall of heat against hers. Only me, he growled, the promise and possession in those 2 words making her knees weak. Then, as suddenly as it began, he wrenched away. They stared at each other, breathing hard. The space between them charged with unspent passion. We can't, his voice was ragged. Not like this, not until... Until what? Frustration sharpened her tone. Until you forgive me, until you trust me, until some magical moment when all the pain disappears. Until I know I'm not using you. The raw honesty in his voice stopped her cold. Until I know this is love and not just loneliness and memory and the convenience of you being here. Clara felt the words like a slap, but she saw the pain in his eyes, the self-loathing. He wasn't trying to hurt her, he was trying to protect them both. All right, she said quietly. Then we wait. We take our time. But James, don't push me away while you're figuring it out. Let me stay. Really stay. No more weekends at Murphy's. No more pretending for the town. Just let me be here. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Tommy would like that. Just Tommy. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, not just Tommy. The wind howled outside, but inside, something had shifted. Not a complete thaw, the ice around James's heart was too thick for that, but a crack, maybe, a beginning. Clara returned to her mending, and James to his ledgers. But the air between them remained charged with possibility. Every so often, their eyes would meet, and the memory of that kiss would flare between them like heat lightning. Later, as she prepared for bed in the room that had been Mary's, Clara touched her lips, still feeling the press of his. It wasn't the passionate culmination she'd dreamed of during those long, awful years with Doyle. But it was real. And it was theirs. And it was a promise of sorts. Rome wasn't built in a day, her mother used to say. Neither was trust. Neither was love real love, the kind built on truth and patience and mutual forgiveness. But they had time now. Time and proximity and the slow, steady work of rebuilding. The kiss had shown her what still lived beneath James's careful control. Now she just had to wait for him to believe in it too. In his room down the hall, James lay staring at the ceiling, his body still thrumming with want. He could still taste her, still feel the silk of her hair between his fingers. The careful control he'd maintained for 3 weeks had shattered with one kiss, and he wasn't sure he could rebuild it. Worse, he wasn't sure he wanted to. Tomorrow, he'd have to face her across the breakfast table. Tomorrow. They'd have to navigate this new territory, where she lived under his roof, not as a temporary helper, but as... what, he didn't have a name for it yet? But tonight, in the darkness, he let himself remember, not the pain or the betrayal or the years between, but the rightness of her in his arms, the way she'd said, "Only you," like it was the simplest truth in the world. Maybe it was... The wind died down, and the house settled into sleep, and in their separate rooms, two broken hearts began the slow, careful work of learning to beat as one again. The dust cloud on the horizon announced trouble before the riders became visible. Clara shaded her eyes from the October sun, watching from the porch as three men approached the double C. Even at a distance, she could see they weren't locals, their clothes too fine, their horses too well bred for ordinary cowboys. "Tommy, go inside," she said quietly. The boy, who'd been helping her sort beans for dinner, looked up with curious eyes. "But why we got visitors?" "Inside, now." She used the firm tone she'd learned worked best, and Tommy grudgingly obeyed, though he pressed his nose against the window as soon as he was through the door. James emerged from the barn, Winchester in hand. He'd seen the riders too, and something in their bearing had put him on alert. He positioned himself between the approaching men and the house, the rifle held casually but ready. The lead rider was a man in his 40s, prosperous-looking with silver at his temples and cold eyes that swept the property with proprietary interest. Flanking him were two younger men who had the look of hired guns, careful eyes and hands that stayed near their holsters. James Callahan. The leader's voice carried the cultured tones of Eastern education. "That's right, and you're on my land." "Indeed." The man dismounted with studied elegance. "Allow me to introduce myself. Doyle Crane. I believe you're harboring my wife." Clara's blood turned to ice. It wasn't possible. Doyle was dead. She'd seen his body, had stood at his graveside, but the resemblance was unmistakable. This had to be... "Brother," James said flatly, coming to the same conclusion. "Doyle Crane is dead. Saw the notice in the paper myself." "My younger brother, yes. Unfortunate business." The man he must be, William Crane. Doyle had mentioned him brushed imaginary dust from his coat. However, that doesn't change certain legal realities. Clara Crane is still bound by contracts that extend beyond my brother's death. "What contracts?" James's voice was dangerously quiet. William produced a sheaf of papers from his saddlebag. "Marriage contracts, signed and witnessed, including certain financial arrangements made between the Whitmore and Crane families, debts that transfer to the surviving spouse." Clara stepped onto the porch, unable to stay hidden while they discussed her like property. "Those contracts were signed under duress. I was forced..." "Clara." William's smile was thin and predatory. So like Doyle's, it made her stomach turn. "How lovely to see you again. Though I must say, mourning becomes you better than..." His eyes swept her simple work dress with disdain, whatever this is supposed to be. "Get off my land!" James stepped forward, rifle rising slightly. "Your land?" William laughed. "I think you'll find that's debatable. You see, Mr. Callahan, my brother was quite detailed in his correspondence. He knew exactly where his wayward wife would run when he died. Even had investigators confirm you two had a prior connection." One of the hired guns shifted in his saddle, hand moving toward his weapon. James marked the movement, calculating angles and distances. "Whatever business you think you have with Clara, it ends here," James said. "She's under my protection now." "Protection?" William's eyebrows rose. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're harboring a fugitive, a woman who abandoned her legal husband, who may have even contributed to his death." "Doyle died in a bar fight," Clara interjected. "Everyone knows that." "Do they? A convenient bar fight? Just weeks after you'd been heard threatening to kill him? After you'd been seen purchasing certain substances from the local chemist?" Clara felt the blood drain from her face. That was medicine. For my headaches, Doyle knew. Doyle is dead and can't testify to anything. William's voice hardened. What I have are witnesses who'll swear you poisoned my brother over time, weakening him until even a simple brawl could kill him. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to honor your contracts and return with me to settle your debts properly. She's not going anywhere with you. James's voice cut through the air like a blade. No, then perhaps we should let the law decide. Sheriff Morrison in Cheyenne is very interested in speaking with Mrs. Crane about her husband's death, as are the federal marshals, given that she crossed state lines in her flight. You're lying. But Clara heard the tremor in her own voice. The medicine she'd bought laudanum for the pain when Doyle's beatings were too severe could be twisted to look like poison. And she had threatened him, the night before he died, when he'd tried to... She shuddered, remembering. Am I? William dismounted fully, approaching the porch. Tell me, Clara, do you want to risk it? Do you want to see this man's ranch seized as evidence his son left fatherless when he's arrested for harboring a fugitive? Leave Tommy out of this! The words tore from her throat. Ah, yes, the child. Doyle mentioned him. Said you'd grown quite attached, almost like the child you'll never have, thanks to my brother's enthusiasm. His smile was cruel. Such a shame if the boy had to suffer for your choices. James moved so fast William barely had time to react. The rifle barrel pressed against the man's chest. James's finger on the trigger. Threaten my son again. Give me a reason. The hired guns drew their weapons, but James didn't flinch. Your men fire. You die first. Maybe I die too, but you'll be too dead to care. James, no. Clara descended the porch steps. This is my fight. Like hell it is. He's right about the law. If they've bribed witnesses, manufactured evidence... She touched James's arm gently. I won't let them destroy you and Tommy because of me. Clara, don't... Well. William seemed amused rather than frightened by the rifle against his chest. True love. How touching. Tell me, Callahan, is she worth losing everything? Your ranch, your son, your life? Yes. The answer came without hesitation, and Clara's heart broke a little more. William studied them both, calculation in his eyes. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement. Clara returns with me voluntarily, and I forget all about filing charges. You keep your ranch, your son, your life. Everyone wins. Everyone except Clara. James pressed the rifle harder. What do you really want? Crane, your brother's dead. What's Clara to you? What, she's always been a Whitmore. Do you know how much her father owed us? How much we paid to secure that marriage? William's mask slipped, showing the ugly greed beneath. I'm not leaving empty-handed. Either she comes with me, or I take this ranch as compensation. Your choice. My choice, James laughed bitterly. You think I'd trade her for... Yes. Clara stepped between them, forcing James to lower the rifle. Yes, he accepts. Clara, no. She turned to face him, memorizing every line of his face. You said it yourself, Tommy needs stability. He needs his home, his father. I won't be the reason he loses that. I don't give a damn about the ranch. But I do. Because you built it. Because it's Tommy's future. Because it's the life you made when I failed to show up. She touched his face gently. I've cost you enough. James, I won't cost you this too. How noble. William's voice dripped sarcasm. You have 1 hour to gather your things. Clara, then we leave. Now wait a minute, James started, but Clara silenced him with a look. 1 hour, she agreed. William remounted, his hired guns keeping their weapons drawn. Don't think about running. I have men watching all the roads out of town. And Callahan, don't try to be a hero. You've got a son to think about. They rode off, leaving dust and devastation in their wake. James immediately grabbed Clara's shoulders, fury and fear warring in his eyes. What are you doing? We can fight this, get the sheriff, hire a lawyer. With what proof? My word against manufactured evidence, James. You know how these things go. The Cranes have money, influence. They'll destroy us both and enjoy doing it. So you're just giving up after everything we've been through? I'm choosing... She pulled free of his grip. For once in my life, I'm making a choice. And I choose to protect you and Tommy. Don't, his voice broke. Don't you dare act like this is for me. I just got you back. Clara, I can't. I won't lose you again. You survived without me before. I didn't survive. I existed. There's a difference. He caught her hands, pressing them against his chest where his heart hammered. Feel that's what you do to me. That's what the thought of losing you does. Please, Clara, there has to be another way. She wanted to fall into his arms, to pretend there was a solution that didn't end with her in William Crane's power or James in jail. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it possible. Take care of Tommy, she whispered. Tell him his angel had to fly away. But she loved him. Tell him that every night. Tell him yourself, because you're not going anywhere. James. Pa? Tommy's voice from the doorway made them both turn. The boy stood there, eyes wide with fear. Is the bad man taking Clara away? James knelt, pulling his son close. No, partner. No one's taking Clara anywhere. You promise. Over Tommy's head. James met Clara's eyes. She saw the moment he made his decision, saw the steel enter his spine and the determination set his jaw. I promise, he told his son, but his eyes never left Clara's. She's not going anywhere. We're a family now, and families stick together. Clara felt tears threaten. James, you don't understand what you're risking. I understand perfectly. He stood, Tommy's hand in his. I understand that I spent 5 years believing lies because I was too proud to fight for the truth. I understand that you suffered alone because I failed you. I understand that if I let you walk away now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. The ranch is dirt and wood. It can be rebuilt. You can't be replaced. He moved closer, free hand cupping her cheek. We have an hour. Enough time to pack what matters and get to the territorial judge in Laramie. Judge Carter owes me a favor from the cavalry days. He'll listen. And if he doesn't, if the Cranes have reached him too, then we keep running, all of us, together. He glanced down at Tommy. What do you say, partner ready for an adventure? Tommy's face lit up. Really, all of us together? All of us together. James confirmed, if Clara's willing. She looked at them, this man who'd chosen her over everything, this boy who called her his angel, her family, if she was brave enough to claim them. Clara, James's voice was soft, uncertain. Will you run with us? The sensible thing would be to sacrifice herself. The noble thing would be to protect them by leaving. But Clara had been sensible and noble for 5 years, and it had brought nothing but pain. Maybe it was time to be brave instead. Yes, she whispered, then stronger. Yes, all of us together. James's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. Then we'd better hurry. We've got a judge to see about some lies that need exposing. They moved as one, gathering essentials, saddling horses, preparing for a flight that would either save them or damn them. But they moved together, and that made all the difference. As they prepared to ride out, Clara caught James's hand. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, he silenced her with a quick, fierce kiss. Then we face it together. No more running alone. Clara, never again. She nodded, throat tight with emotion. Together. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The sound of horses in the distance spurred them to action. Time to ride, to fight, to claim the future they'd been denied for too long. Together. The Harvest Festival filled Rock Creek's main street with lanterns, music, and the scent of apple cider. Clara stood behind the church booth, ladling out cups of hot cider while trying to ignore the whispers that followed her everywhere. 3 days had passed since their flight to Laramie. 3 days since Judge Carter had reviewed their evidence and promised to investigate. 3 days of waiting for either salvation or destruction. "Shameless, Mrs." Pritchard muttered, loud enough to carry, "living in sin with that Callahan man. And now she has the nerve to show her face at a church function." Clara's hand trembled slightly as she poured another cup, but she kept her smile fixed. James had warned her it would be like this. But she'd insisted on coming. Hiding would only fuel more gossip. "Clara!" Tommy ran up, his face painted like a tiger thanks to Mrs. Henderson's artistic efforts. "Pa says to tell you the pie contest is starting. You should enter your apple pie." "I don't think that's a good idea, sweetheart. But why your pie is the best, even better than Mrs. Henderson's. But don't tell her I said that." Before Clara could respond, a familiar voice cut through the festival noise. "Well, well, the murderous widow plays at being respectable." William Crane stood before the booth, his same 2 hired guns flanking him. The festival noise seemed to dim as people noticed the confrontation brewing. "Mr. Crane," Clara kept her voice steady, "I thought you'd left town." "Leave before our business is concluded? I think not." He picked up one of the displayed pies, examining it with theatrical interest. "Tell me, Clara, did you bake these yourself, or did you have help? You always did need help with everything. Didn't you following instructions, doing what you're told?" "That's enough." James appeared beside her, having materialized from the crowd with his usual silent efficiency. "You've been told to stay away from her." Told by whom? A territorial judge with no real authority. William set down the pie with deliberate carelessness, making the table shake. "I have rights. Callahan, legal documents. Your frontier justice doesn't change that." "Speaking of documents." A new voice interrupted. Samuel Morrison, Rock Creek's sheriff, approached with a leather portfolio under his arm. Behind him walked old Walter Hutchins, the town's postmaster, looking nervous but determined. "Sheriff." William's smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed. "Come to enjoy the festival." "Come to do my job." Morrison was a steady man, fair-minded and impossible to bribe, which was why the Cranes had planned to go over his head to Cheyenne. "Mr. Hutchins here has something interesting to share. Go on, Walter." The postmaster cleared his throat, aware of the growing audience. "Been bothering me for days, ever since since Clara came to town. Knew I recognized the name Crane, but couldn't place it. Then I remembered." He pulled out a familiar yellow envelope. 5 years back, maybe 6. "A man paid me $20 to destroy any letters between here and Chicago. Said his daughter was being pestered by an unwanted suitor." Clara's breath caught. "My father." Except he weren't the only one. Walter produced another envelope, this one bearing Doyle Crane's seal. "This fellow paid me said to burn any letters from a Clara Whitmore to anyone in Wyoming. Paid me monthly for near 2 years before the letters stopped coming." "That proves nothing," William said, but his composed mask was cracking. "Maybe not." Sheriff Morrison opened his portfolio. "But this does. Telegraph from Judge Carter in Laramie. Seems he's been doing some investigating. Found some interesting witnesses in Chicago, servants from the Crane household who remember a young bride kept locked in her rooms. A doctor who treated injuries he was told came from falling downstairs, but looked suspiciously like belt marks." The crowd had grown, festival goers drawn by the drama. Clara saw familiar faces: Mrs. Henderson looking troubled, Mrs. Murphy nodding grimly, even sour Mrs. Pritchard appearing shaken. "Servants can be bribed," William said dismissively. "Maybe. But can federal marshals—" Morrison produced another paper. "Funny thing about your brother's death? Crane. The Marshal Service has been investigating him for months. Embezzlement, fraud, forging documents, including, it seems, marriage certificates." That's impossible. The marriage was legal. Was it? The sheriff's smile was sharp. Because according to the reverend who supposedly performed the ceremony, he was in Boston that entire month. Never set foot in Chicago. Makes a person wonder what other documents might be forgeries. William's hired guns shifted restlessly, hands moving toward their weapons. The crowd backed away, mothers pulling children behind their skirts. I wouldn't. James's voice was quiet, but carried clearly. Take a look around. Boys, this isn't Chicago. Indeed, several townsmen had appeared as if by magic, all armed, all watching the hired guns with unfriendly eyes. Whatever Rock Creek thought of Clara's propriety, they didn't take kindly to outsiders threatening violence at their harvest festival. This isn't over, William snarled, his composure finally shattered. You think some backward sheriff and a few forged papers will stop me? I have connections, influence. You have nothing? Clara stepped forward, finding her voice at last. You're just like your brother, a bully who thinks money entitles you to own people. But you can't own what was never yours. You belong to my brother. His death doesn't change. I belong to no one. The words rang across the square. Your brother took my body by force, but he never owned me, and neither do you. A murmur ran through the crowd. Clara felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely free. The secret was out. Let them judge her as they would. Pa! Tommy tugged on James's sleeve, confused by the adult drama. Is that man trying to take Clara away? He's trying, James said grimly, but he's failing. Good. Tommy marched forward before anyone could stop him, planting himself in front of Clara. You can't have her. She's ours now. Tommy, get back here, James started, but the boy stood firm. No, he's mean and he's lying and he can't take our Clara. He glared up at William with fierce 7-year-old determination. She reads me stories and makes the best pie, and she sang to me when I was sick. She's my mama now, not yours. The square fell silent. Clara felt tears prick her eyes at Tommy's fierce protection. At his unconscious claim, my mama, she saw James's throat work as he swallowed hard. Out of the mouths of babes. Mrs., Henderson said clearly, stepping forward. Seems to me the boy's got the right of it. Clara's been nothing but good to that child. Whatever happened in Chicago, she's Rock Creek folk now. Been working herself to the bone at that ranch. Mrs., Murphy added, joining the growing circle of support. Never complained, never asked for charity. That's not the behavior of a guilty woman. One by one, the townspeople stepped forward. Not all of them, some still hung back. Judgment in their eyes, but enough. Enough to show William Crane that his money and threats held no power here. Sheriff Morrison. Judge Carter's voice rang across the square. The territorial judge had arrived on the evening stage, still dusty from travel. I believe you have some arrests to make. Judge Morrison straightened. On what charges? Conspiracy, fraud, attempted kidnapping, and interstate flight to avoid prosecution. Carter produced a federal warrant. It seems Mr. William Crane has been a very busy man. The authorities in Chicago are most eager to discuss his brother's actual business dealings. And his own. William went pale. You can't? I can, and I am. Morrison nodded to his deputies. William Crane, you're under arrest. You boys with him can drop your guns and join him. Or ride out now. Your choice. The hired guns exchanged glances, then carefully holstered their weapons and backed toward their horses. They knew when a job had gone bad. Within moments, they were riding hard for the town limits. William wasn't so lucky. As the deputies closed in, his composure finally cracked completely. This is wrong. She's a murderess, a thief. She's a survivor, James said quietly, pulling Clara against his side. And she's under my protection, permanently. The crowd parted as Morrison led William away, the man's protests fading into the distance. Judge Carter approached, tipping his hat to Clara, Ma'am, my apologies for what you've endured. The evidence from Chicago is clear your marriage to Doyle Crane was fraudulent, coerced through drugs and false documentation. You're free. Free. Clara tested the word, scarcely believing it. Truly. Truly. Though I suspect you've been free for some time now. His eyes twinkled as he glanced between her and James. Just took the law a while to catch up. The judge moved off to speak with Morrison, leaving Clara standing with James and Tommy in the middle of the crowd. The festival noise slowly resumed, musicians tuning up, children laughing, the normal sounds of life carrying on. So, Mrs. Henderson said briskly, about that pie contest. I believe Tommy mentioned you have an entry. Clara blinked, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from danger to domesticity. Yes, but nothing. Best get it registered before the judging starts. The older woman's eyes were kind. Welcome to Rock Creek. Clara, properly this time. As the crowd dispersed, returning to their festival activities, Clara felt James's hand find hers. You all right? He asked softly. I don't know, she admitted. For 5 years, I've been running or hiding or fighting. I don't know how to be free. We'll figure it out. He brought their joined hands up, kissing her knuckles. Together. Together, she echoed, the word a promise and a prayer. Come on, Tommy tugged at them impatiently. The three-legged race is starting, and I told Samuel Henderson we'd beat him and his PA. Clara laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside a place she'd thought Doyle had killed. A three-legged race, James? Your son is very optimistic about our coordination. Our son, James corrected quietly, and Clara's heart stopped. If you'll have us, both of us, properly. She looked down at Tommy's eager face, then up at James's vulnerable one, her boys, her family, her future. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. Tommy whooped, drawing amused glances from passers-by. Does this mean you'll teach me to make pie and stay forever and maybe we can get a dog? We'll see about the dog, James said. But he was smiling, truly smiling for the first time since Clara had returned. Right now, we have a race to win. They joined the other families at the starting line, Tommy in the middle, their ankles tied together with strips of burlap. Around them, Rock Creek celebrated the harvest, celebrated community, celebrated life carrying on despite hardship and drama. Ready? Tommy asked, bouncing with excitement. Ready? Clara confirmed, her free hand finding James's across their son's shoulders. The starter's pistol fired, and they lurched forward, immediately tangling and nearly falling. Tommy shrieked with laughter as they stumbled, caught themselves, found their rhythm. 3 people learning to move as one, awkward and imperfect, but trying, always trying. They came in dead last, collapsing in a heap at the finish line, grass-stained and breathless with laughter. But as James helped her up, as Tommy hugged them both with sticky hands, as the autumn sun blessed them with its golden light, Clara knew they'd already won everything that mattered. She was free, she was home, she was loved. And in the wild, untamed territory of Wyoming, under a sky vast enough to hold all their dreams. That was more than enough. It was everything. The November wind carried the scent of snow and sage as Clara stood before the mirror in Mrs. Henderson's spare room, adjusting the simple cream-colored dress she'd sewn herself. No white this time, she'd had enough of white dresses that meant captivity. This dress meant choice, meant freedom, meant love willingly given and received. Stop fussing. Mrs. Henderson chided gently, pinning a spray of late wildflowers in Clara's hair. You look beautiful. More importantly, you look happy. I am happy. Clara touched the small gold band on her finger, Mary's ring, which James had offered with trembling hands the night before. I just can't quite believe it's real." "Believe it." Mrs. Murphy appeared in the doorway, beaming. "That man's been pacing outside the church for an hour. Sheriff Morrison threatened to arrest him for disturbing the peace." Through the window, Clara could see the small church filling with townspeople. Not everyone, some still held their judgments close, but enough. The people who mattered. The people who'd stood by them when William Crane tried to tear their world apart. Mama Clara. Tommy burst through the door, his new suit already slightly askew. "Pa says to tell you the Reverend's ready and asks if you're planning to keep him waiting another 5 years. The women laughed, and Clara knelt to straighten Tommy's collar. "Tell your PA that good things are worth waiting for." "He said you'd say that." Tommy grinned. "He also said to give you this." He produced a small wrapped package, bouncing with excitement as Clara opened it. Inside was a silver locket, tarnished with age, but beautiful. Clara opened it to find 2 tiny photographs, one of James in his cavalry uniform, young and serious, the other of Tommy as a baby. "It was my ma's," Tommy explained. "Her real ma's. I mean, not Mary. Pa's been saving it for when I got married, but he said you should have it now 'cause you're my mama and that makes you family." Clara's vision blurred. She pulled Tommy close, careful not to muss either of their clothes. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll treasure it always." "Don't cry." Tommy pulled back in alarm. "Pa said ladies sometimes cry when they're happy, but it don't make sense to me." "Doesn't make sense," Clara corrected automatically, then laughed. "And your pa's right. These are happy tears." "Ready, Mrs.?" Henderson asked gently. Clara stood, fastening the locket around her neck. "Ready." The walk to the church was short, but Clara felt every step. The last time she'd walked toward a wedding, she'd been drugged, terrified, coerced. This time, her steps were sure, her mind clear, her heart full. This time, she was walking toward the life she'd chosen. The church doors opened, and Clara saw him. James stood at the altar in his best suit, the one he'd worn to court in Laramie. His hair was neatly tied back, his face freshly shaven. But it was his eyes that caught her, storm gray and steady, full of love and promise and just a hint of the boy who'd kissed her breathless in her father's barn a lifetime ago. The ceremony was simple. Reverend Davies, who'd arrived from Cheyenne to replace the circuit preacher, spoke about love's endurance, about second chances, about the courage to trust after betrayal. Clara barely heard the words, lost in James's eyes, in the warm pressure of his hands holding hers. "Do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." The words came strong and clear, nothing like the whispered, drugged mumble of that horrible day in Chicago. "Do you, James Callahan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was rough with emotion, his hands tightening on hers. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." James cupped her face with infinite tenderness. "Finally," he whispered, "just for her, my Clara, my wife." The kiss was sweet, reverent, a promise sealed before God and their community. When they parted, the small church erupted in cheers. Tommy jumped up and down, whooping with glee. "Kiss her again." Laughter rippled through the congregation, and James obliged, dipping Clara dramatically. She came up laughing, breathless, alive in a way she hadn't been in years. The reception was held at the Double C, the ranch house warm with lanterns and filled with neighbors who'd come to celebrate. Mrs. Murphy had outdone herself with the food, and even Mrs. Pritchard had contributed a cake, her disapproval finally thawed by the judge's revelations about Clara's past. As the sun set over the Wyoming mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Clara found herself on the porch with James, watching their guests dance in the yard. Tommy was teaching the Henderson children some complicated game involving sticks and hoops, his laughter carrying on the wind. "No regrets?" James asked, pulling her closer. "None." Clara leaned into his warmth. "You—" "Only one." At her questioning look, he smiled. "That it took us so long to get here. Maybe we needed the journey." Clara said thoughtfully, "Maybe we had to break apart to learn how to come back together stronger. Maybe." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But I'm done with journeys for a while. I just want to be here, with you, building our life." Speaking of building, Clara bit her lip, suddenly nervous. "I have something to tell you. Something I learned from Dr. Patterson when I saw him last week." James tensed. "Are you ill, Clara? If something's wrong—" "No, nothing's wrong." She took his hand, placing it over her still flat stomach. "In fact, something's finally very, very right." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by wonder, joy, and just a touch of fear. "We're—" "Sometime in early summer, Tommy's going to have a brother or sister." James stared at her, then at his hand on her belly, then back at her face. "But Doyle, you said the doctor in Chicago told you—" "The doctor in Chicago was wrong, or lying. Doctor Patterson says I'm healthy, the baby's healthy, everything's perfect." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "We're having a baby, James, our baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of spun glass. "Our baby," he repeated, wonder in every syllable. Then, louder, "We're having a baby." The announcement brought cheers from their guests. Tommy racing over to demand explanations about where babies came from and whether he could teach it to rope cattle, in the chaos of congratulations and questions. Clara caught James's eye. He winked, mouthing later with a promise that sent heat through her veins. Later came after the last guest departed, after Tommy was tucked in bed with strict instructions not to disturb them unless the house was on fire. Clara stood in their bedroom, not Mary's, not the guest room, but theirs, brushing her hair by lamplight. James came up behind her, taking the brush from her hands. "Let me—" He worked through her hair with gentle strokes, the intimacy of the simple act making her shiver. In the mirror, she watched his face, saw the concentration, the care, the love written in every line. "I used to dream about this," he said quietly. "During the war, when the fighting was bad, I'd close my eyes and picture you brushing your hair by lamplight. It kept me sane, kept me fighting to come home. And when you came home, I was gone." The old guilt rose, but he stilled it with a touch. "You were surviving. We both were. That's over now." He set aside the brush, turning her to face him. "No more looking back, Clara. From now on, we only look forward." She wound her arms around his neck. "I like the sound of forward." "So do I." His kiss was different now, not desperate or hungry, but deep, claiming. A husband kissing his wife in their own home, with all the time in the world. When he lifted her, carrying her to their bed, Clara felt the last chains of her past fall away. This was nothing like the violence she'd endured with Doyle. This was James, her James, worshipping her with hands and lips and whispered endearments. This was love made manifest, healing made physical. "Stay with me," she gasped as they moved together, finding rhythms old and new. "Always," he promised, pressing deeper, holding her like she was his whole world. "Always, my Clara, my love, my wife." And in the quiet of their room, with the Wyoming stars bearing witness through the window, they wrote a new story on each other's skin, not a story of loss and pain and years apart, but of finding and choosing and coming home, of a love that had survived the worst the world could offer and emerged stronger for the testing. When they lay quiet afterward, Clara's head on James's chest, his hand splayed protectively over where their child grew. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, The scared girl in the wedding dress at the train station seemed like a different person, a character from someone else's story. "What are you thinking?" James asked, pressing a kiss to her hair. "About how far we've come, about how I stood on that platform certain my life was over, and now—" She gestured to encompass the room. "Him. Everything. Now it's just beginning." "Our life," he corrected. "Our beginning." "Yes," Clara agreed, tilting her face up for another kiss. "Ours." Outside, snow began to fall. The first of the season, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, but inside, warmed by love and hope and the promise of the future they'd build together. Clara and James Callahan began there forever. Tommy, despite strict instructions, crept to their door sometime near dawn, not to disturb, just to listen to the quiet murmur of voices, the soft laughter of two people learning to be happy. He smiled, hugging his mother's handkerchief, and padded back to bed. His PA was smiling again. His mama was home. Soon he'd have a baby to teach important things to, like the best fishing spots and how to avoid misses. Pritchard when you'd been in the mud. Life, Tommy decided, was just about perfect. And in the big bed in the room at the end of the hall, wrapped in each other's arms and planning their tomorrows, his parents would have agreed. Love had won. Despite everything, the lies, the pain, the years of separation, love had won. And in the wild, beautiful territory of Wyoming, under a blanket of new snow and endless possibilities, the Callahan family began the rest of their lives. Together, always together. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts on Clara and James's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of love conquering all in the American frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Night Channel. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit the hype button to help more people discover these passionate stories of the Old West. Your support means everything and helps bring more of these romantic adventures to life. Until next time, partners.